Oh, it's got bubbles. And we're live. We're just starting off on talking about whānau. Mine are 15, about to be 16, like in a month or so, 13 and 10.
Wait, so you have 4 kids?
3.
3 kids. Okay, one's 15 turning 16.
Yeah, 15, 13, 10.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Hands full, man.
Crazy.
That's wild.
Life of a solo dad.
Yeah. I have a 5 and a bit-year-old stepson.
Yeah.
He'll be 6 in March.
Yeah.
And that's hands full. I'm like, yo, this is wild. And
Yeah.
you've got 3 of them.
Yeah.
Good on you.
I don't do boys though, eh?
You've got 3 daughters.
Yeah, I don't do boys. I don't get them. It's funny. I remember as a kid, I used to grow up, and there was always this. I've got 3 older sisters, and a mum. Well, I had a mum, and always my group of friends was always heavily weighted female. I was that guy who was always like, you look at my group, like you look at my 21st, and 60% of the people there are my female friends, and so I've got daughters, and it's like, works for me. I wouldn't know what to do with a boy.
I was the same when I was younger. I had a lot of female friends. Like I always not enjoyed the company of women in a romantic sexual sense, but I just like hanging out with girls. I felt more... Excuse me.
You got bubbles as well.
I guess I felt more at home. You know what I mean? Like I spent a long time as like an 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old like on the phone for long hours just talking to female friends.
Yep.
And
bubbles.
Oh, dude. Hectic.
Well, it was crazy because I went to an all-boys Catholic boarding school as well.
I went to an all-boys school too, not Catholic nor boarding though.
Where'd you go?
Carlston Boys.
Okay, Sacred Heart College. Went to Sacred Heart and St. Peter's College, the 2 schools I went to.
Yeah.
Mountain Road in Epsom and Glen Innes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was crazy how, I wonder if that's a part of it, you know, surrounded by them and sausage all the time. You end up, when you leave school, kind of gravitating and meeting, you know, the people you haven't spent time with. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Because through high school, I had still maintained like friendships with females who didn't go to this. Like a lot of my friends didn't go to the school I went to, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I guess it shifted to a more equal balance of like hanging out with boys and girls, men and women.
Do you still find that now as a grown up, as a mature adult?
That I have female friends?
Yeah, like more so, or is it evened out?
I'd say it's evened out. Although, you know, I've had girlfriends over time who are like, well, I've never had a boyfriend who's had so many female friends.
Yeah, right.
Or I'm friends with like lots of exes or friends with lots of girls I used to date.
Has that ever been a problem? Ever been a problem that like someone you're dating has been like, dude, I'm the girl who was a friend now, the rest of them can F off?
I think I had one girlfriend, but she had a lot of other stuff going on that made her particularly insecure.
Yeah.
And to be fair, my mental health wasn't the best at the time either. So I can understand why she might have, I guess, if I'm trying to be compassionate and empathetic.
Yeah.
But on the whole, no, because I guess I'm these days pretty good at communicating it. Communicating the dynamics of relationship or how I know someone.
Yeah.
When I was young, like in my early 20s, I guess there were friendships that became a bit like, what is this?
Yeah.
And
like, what is this as? Could there be something more here?
Could there be something more here? Right. Or am I hanging out with you for some sort of like validation? Yeah. Or it was kind of a bit blurry and a bit grey, and that was an interesting thing to look back on now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's important to be aware of, I don't know, like, because relationships are on a spectrum, right?
Of course.
And where they can slide if you're not, I guess, good with your boundaries.
Yep. And we should say, Tim, we're actually rolling now. Richie Hardcore. Hi, thanks for coming in.
No worries, man.
Started 8 minutes ago.
Yeah, thanks for, people are like, who's this guy? Thanks for having me. I'm always very generally like surprised and humbled that people want to talk with me. So I'm really appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm interested in what you talked about before when you said if I'm being empathetic like towards someone in the past. I'm going through this thing at the moment where I'm kind of going, empathy is a bit overrated. And it's not because I think it's bad, but I think I've had a lot of empathy, well, maybe what I've thought was empathy for quite a long time, and I've just started to go, fuck, I haven't been enough of a prick. Like I've put everybody else's feelings and thoughts, and I need a little bit more like I'm explaining it poorly, but a bit more of a wall. Having a bit of hardness in this instance for this reason is actually okay.
I think what I'm hearing when you say that is that you need better boundaries. You don't need to be less empathetic and more of a prick. You can still be kind and understand the situation that person's in and why they do the things that they do, even if they're an asshole or hurtful to you. But you need to put better walls up in order to keep yourself emotionally safe, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because you can still be compassionate and kind, but not take shit.
It's an interesting thing in my experience, is that when you get to the end of a particular journey in life and you look back and you go, how did I do? What happened there? What was I on there? And I think what I've done a few times is I've seen some journeys I've been on, and I've put myself in those places where I shouldn't have. Like I should have in that instance A, I should have actually, I should have gone for what I needed there and I didn't. And in instant B, actually, I should have pushed harder for this. And it's interesting, they say hindsight's 20/20, but one of the things, I've got a counsellor I see every second week, and it's always good to talk. I think everyone should have a counsellor.
Me
it's
too.
Fantastic.
Me too, yeah.
And I said that thing to him the other day about I need to be a bit more of a prick, and I don't mean it as black and white as that. It's me paraphrasing about
Sure.
about maybe I've been too nice, too flexible, put other people's needs first, and sometimes that's appropriate to put their needs first, but sometimes it's not.
Did you have dysfunctional parents?
No, not really. No, my mum and dad were great. I mean, typical Irish Catholic family. I didn't know what divorce was because not only my mum and dad, but all of their siblings that lived in Auckland where I lived, no divorce there. All of their best friends, no divorce there. So it really was that nuclear family all around me sort of thing.
Sure. So you think you had good role modeling?
I think so.
I
mean, it's interesting. You'll probably know this. When you end up kind of as an adult looking back on your life as a child, you kind of go, oh, I missed out there and I missed out there and I was a little left short there. But, all in all, no complaints.
Right.
How can you?
Well, yeah, I ask because often people who do have dysfunctional parents and thus their own dysfunctional childhoods do have really poor boundaries. Like I do. Like I had the opposite childhood of you. Like, I had a really dysfunctional childhood, which I've talked about a lot publicly, and I've had really bad boundaries. I've been a real rescuer in like my romantic relationships historically, and really kind of sought on a subconscious level to recreate some of the less healthy dynamics of my childhood, which I've come to learn, like academically, is quite true of a lot of people who grow up with some dysfunction. You find what's familiar, whether you mean to or not. Most of the time you don't mean to. I
think in the last 2 years in particular, I've learned what a real boundary is as well.
Sure.
And like how to put it in place. And sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes I think I'm someone, if we're going to get into our kind of personal foibles conversation, I'm someone who has been seen quite often as a troublemaker. Like if you talk to my bosses, especially when I'm speaking radio, I was often seen as someone that caused them extra work to do. Like I used to say quite proudly, and because it's true, that I was the most complained about host on Newstalk ZB. So I was the bottom of the totem pole. Like I was the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. I was the last in. I had the worst shifts. I was a nobody in there. And I was the most complained about. So you can tell for a boss, that's a pretty annoying thing.
Why were you that way?
Well, I tell you what the interesting thing is, and it's sometimes hard to talk about things honestly without sounding arrogant and stuff, but these are just the facts. I found out I was dyslexic when I was 40. I found out that if I had have known that when I was 14, I would have had a very different educational sector. I found out actually through my children going through something about this thing called twice exceptionality. Twice exceptionality is where someone has a learning difficulty or disability and they're gifted. You can also get thrice exceptional where you've got a learning disability, a physical disability, and being gifted.
Sure.
So someone might be dyslexic, they might be in a wheelchair for whatever reason, and they might be gifted. So they'll be thrice exceptional.
Sure, like Stephen Hawking or someone.
Yeah, he's probably off the charts, every kind of exceptional.
Is that what you're talking about, though?
Okay, but it's more simple than that as well, because there are a lot of kids out there, and probably talking to teachers, they will see this. And the sad thing is, there's not a lot of knowledge in the schools about this at the moment. I know someone who's studying in this area, and I started learning about it when one of my children, we started off by homeschooling them. Long story why, but there was a medical issue that wasn't quite sorted. So we thought, screw school, we'll just start homeschooling and get the medical issue sorted. And so we knew intimately how smart this kid was, and went to school after a while. And the teacher was like, "Oh, they're in the perfect space they should be. They're in the middle. They're doing all the things they should be doing." And we were just like, this is this kid that was talking about her dad being nocturnal when they were 2 years old because because her dad worked nights on ZB sort of thing. This is not an average child. Now, I don't say that as a helicopter soccer parent. Just I even though I was a terrible teacher, I was a primary school teacher. So
you were a primary school teacher yourself?
Not at that moment,
okay.
but had been. So I'd been through some education there, and my child's mother was a secondary school teacher. So there was enough knowledge in there to go, this kid is not average, and that started a journey for that family, where we discovered actually this kid was gifted in many areas, but also had a learning disability or difficulty. Sure. And then, of course, a whole bunch of lights went off for me, and I'm like, And I was married then, and for my then partner's 40th birthday, she sent me to get an educational assessment done as a way for, I think,
that was like a birthday present?
Yeah.
Educational assessment?
For her to learn more about me, and I came out as dyslexic, and it was the first time that I knew. And learning that, oh my God, freed so much in me.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that's kind of weird and hard to say, but, finding out that on the scale of IQ, I'm top 2%, and finding out that I can now join Mensa, which I did do, and that kind of stuff.
I don't even know what Mensa is.
It's like the high IQ society sort of thing.
Secret gang,
the secret handshake. And all of a sudden, these workplace things started to make sense. Again, as arrogant as this sounds, I'd be sitting in this meeting with these broadcasters who are the biggest broadcasters in the country, right? And there'd be these conversations going on, and I'd be like, but that's an easy solution. This is how you do it. But of course, I was the bottom of the totem pole nobody. So then I'd get frustrated. I go, why are we having these stupid fucking conversations? Like, I wouldn't say this to them because it wasn't my place, about these silly issues. They're so easy to solve. And that's because I had the kind of mind that could solve them, but I couldn't say that to these people. So then I think, hang on, these guys have been in the industry for 40 years. They know far more than me. So when I got this diagnosis, I was like,
light bulb moment.
Maybe, yeah. So people and bosses in particular who saw me as difficult, I was like, oh, shit. If I'd have known more about how my brain worked and stuff, then maybe it would have been a very different path.
I bet you our prisons are full of people who've had experiences like that.
And schools all over the place. It's that kid that, and this was me at school, it's that kid that doesn't really need to try, scoots through school getting B's, and the comment on all their reports are...
Could do better.
If they applied themselves, what they could do. Yeah. That's the kid that's going to have... parents, if you're listening, send that kid to get assessed with an educational psychologist.
Yeah. And I've got personal friends who've struggled with dyslexia and it wasn't diagnosed till later. Or even when I think about my own life, like I'd had a pretty disruptive family life through my childhood, my adolescence, and every time I got kicked out of class for being disruptive, no one stopped to ask me, oh, what's going on at home? Like, never once.
Why? Wow.
And, I wasn't a terrible student. I wasn't like an arsonist or getting in fights or selling crack or anything, but I definitely wasn't living up to my potential. And while I'm no Mensa Club member, I was like, I don't know, like I could have been a good student.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I found my people, and I'm happy with how my life path has turned out despite a whole range of different adverse experiences.
Yeah.
I think it's important to look at not what could have been, but where we are now and how they can be good things despite the adversity that we've been through, right?
Yep.
Quite often we kind of, I don't know, I gave a talk last year at the DAPANS. DAPANS is a National Addiction Practitioners organisation. I gave a talk at their annual dinner, and it was called "My Trauma is My Superpower."
Right.
Because like all the shitty things that you go through can actually be wonderful teachers.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
and we need to be mindful of that.
Well, that's like when you've been single and you've used those dating apps, and people say things like, "I don't have any baggage," and I'm like, "Dude, there's
You're a
nothing
human.
wrong."
Everyone's got baggage.
Or they say, "I don't want someone with baggage," and I'm like, "But baggage is the parts in your life that you've learned. Your baggage is part of your story that's formed you into the person you are today."
Yeah, it's the unprocessed stuff that becomes a problem. Like we all carry weight, right?
Yeah.
Like even if you've had like a good clean's the wrong word. If you've had a good easier run than others' life, you're still going to have stuff. You're still going to have your idiosyncrasies or your tics, emotionally or mental health wise or whatever it may be. You just might be annoying. You might never, I don't know, do the dishes or whatever. It's that unprocessed stuff that I think becomes a roadblock to a healthier relationship. So we all need to, like you said, maybe you don't need to see a therapist, but we all need to like develop tools that allow us to develop some self-knowledge and why we're the way we are and how that can impact our relationships, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in school, it's in our romantic and sexual lives.
The therapist thing, I'm really, if not a therapist, someone with an external voice, I think is so powerful.
A mentor.
The way I describe it is I talk about, and I've used this example before on the podcast, I talk about your life being a game of rugby. Because I'm in New Zealand and that's the only analogy I'm allowed to use.
I don't really know rugby.
That's all right, fine.
But I think I've picked up enough by osmosis.
So your life being a game of rugby, there's 30 players on there.
Okay, got it.
Right, and there's a stand around it and people are watching the game. The problem is if the game is your life,
yes,
if you're in that front row where the forwards all jump on top of each other, actually you don't know what's going on in the back because your head's down and you're in the scrum or the ruck or whatever, whereas someone sitting in the stands who's not a part of your life,
much bigger perspective.
They can actually see that the wing is open or that the fullback's injured or whatever. They can actually see your life better than you can sometimes. And that's how I kind of feel about counselling or therapy, is that I want someone in the stand watching my life kind of going, what about this? What about this? Hey, the wing's open. And I know what you've just said about maybe not everyone, but I think actually everyone should do it.
No, I use the same analogy with fight sports, right? Like there's one individual in the ring, fighting, but you need a good corner person to tell you the gaps or where you're getting caught or where your offense could be better. Yeah. And I totally get your analogy. Because they can see the fight better. They can see the fight better.
Yeah, if I had a thought about it, I would have used the fight analogy.
When you're too close or you're too far away, right? Like you're not going to have a good perspective. But this middle ground, so you have the best perspective. Yeah. So I totally agree, man. And we need to encourage people to, I guess, be vulnerable or self-reflective enough to ask for that help. And at the same time, I think, because there is all this increasing conversation around mental health, for example, and depression, for example, ask for help. But if you're in a bad space or you haven't got a catalyst to start that conversation, we need to encourage people, I think, to also offer help and not be self-contained and it's not my business. And I think quite often a lot of human suffering could be avoided if people weren't so afraid to get involved in other people's lives. Not in a what's the word I'm looking for? Not in a painful, busybody, controlling way. Sort of way, but in a compassionate, kind way. Like, hey, you're not acting yourself, or how did you get that bruise, or your kids didn't come to school, or I haven't seen you at work for a while, or whatever it might be, or behavior shifted drastically. Encouraging people to open up and have those conversations and offer advice or pathways to professional help, that's really important too. You know what I mean? To help people have that, develop that external perspective that you're talking about.
I think the other thing that's really even more difficult about what you're saying is that there are a lot of people in society who put on the airs and graces of compassion and stuff, but really they're just busybody gossips.
Oh, dude, 100%.
They're like,
Twitter's full of them.
Can I help? What can I do? Yeah. And it's like, such and such and such and such. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, false friends are a real thing.
We've all met those people. So actually, to find someone or to be someone who does that authentically. And genuinely, I feel like they're almost unicorns, It's like they're rare. And I'm not saying that in a good way. It's like, I think in my life, I've run across far more people that have that mask of compassionate, caring, nurturing, loving, when really manipulation, control, nastiness is what's, behind that sort of thing. But then maybe that's just my experience. Maybe it's not.
I'm sorry to hear that. That must be hard. It must be hard for you to...
It was hard.
Must be
it's
hard for you
very
to trust
different
people now if that's what your experience has been.
Maybe.
You know, like if you get burnt all the time or you stop going towards the thing that feels warm at first.
Yeah, maybe. That might be the case. And I think certainly, 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, it was really hard. Not so hard now, because what it has done also, and maybe this is another sporting analogy, if you understand where the gap in the fight is, you can then prepare to defend or attack.
Yeah.
And I now see, and I think mostly fairly accurately, I see through masks pretty fucking quickly.
Yeah.
And I can see I can see the game pretty quickly. And that's actually so I've learned from those experiences, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty hard for someone who's not authentic to get past me these days.
Yeah.
But in that instance, it's actually easier to be close to someone because you can see the authentic nature of them more quickly.
I think a lot of people are both. Like none of us are all wholly good or all wholly bad, and that plays out in our behaviors a lot of the time. I mean, there are some truly like Dalai Lama brilliant people out there, and there's also some real fucking assholes, But I think I don't know. I feel I'm fortunate in that I've been hurt, but I've also hurt other people. I've done shitty things, and but despite all of that, I feel fortunate that I do have a pretty authentic group of people around me who I can have honest conversations with and who will offer that insight. And I hope that you, like, I just met you, but I hope that happens for you too, Like, it's a nice thing to know that there is a safe net of people who, if needed, are there to, be vulnerable with and offer a hand to.
And I think that's something for me that of recent time has been much more evident, which is great.
Oh, good.
Great.
Yeah, there's a light in the darkness, dog.
Well, my part of it for me was moved to Dunedin 5 years ago with the whole whānau, and then within about 18 months, the marriage was over.
Oh, that's hard.
And then, of course, new to Dunedin, work from home, did the kids' school run sort of thing. All of a sudden, nobody I knew, nobody around me, no contact.
It sounds like a recipe for depression.
Well, yeah, it was. Certainly was. There was certainly some medicated help for a while.
Sure.
Which is totally appropriate and cool, and I'm totally comfortable with. But yeah, come through certainly. But it didn't have that support group because of purely location, but still had beautiful friends. Phoned a mate of mine on the Monday after the Saturday night sort of event. Phoned him on the Monday morning. I was going to do some work for him in radio later that month, and I said, dude, I'm going to have to just put it off for a few weeks. This has just happened. And he basically hung up the phone, got on a plane, and was here.
Why did you decide to stay here and not move home?
Well, because then you'd have to figure, because I had a family and kids were in school, and
you didn't uproot them all.
Well, I mean, also if you've just broken up with someone, I don't think there'd be a way that you could insist they move with you as well. Then what do you do?
That's hard. That's true, right?
You suck. I want to go back to Auckland, and you have to come with me. I don't know if that's really going to play out so much.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I love Dunedin. I'm passionate about Dunedin. One of the things I love about what we're doing is one of the things I love about this is we are in Dunedin making this product for the world sort of thing.
It's cool here. Like I'm kind of in and out. I've got to go home first thing tomorrow morning, but it's a beautiful city. I've been here a couple of times before, but I'd like to spend more time here.
It's got that vibe. Someone chastised me the other day because I compared it to sort of Melbourne and Wellington. I don't know, why the fuck would you want to be a little Wellington? But it's sort of got that cafe culture and that
Wellington's
sort of
cool.
Yeah, I like Wellington too. But I've heard someone describe sort of Wellington as a little Melbourne and Dunedin as a little Wellington. Population size.
Those are like favourable comparisons.
Yeah, I think so too.
Melbourne's like one of the best cities on earth.
One of the things that's great about Dunedin is the students. So the students bring in over $1 billion a year.
Right.
And because the students are here, we have resources that potentially we shouldn't have for a city of our size.
Massively.
So I lived in Tauranga for a couple of years, same size, nowhere near the same resources. But because the students are here, the city and the businesses need to provide for the students. So we have a bunch of be it locations or, be it a stadium or be it whatever, an international airport technically.
That
other cities this size don't. The infrastructure.
It's growing up around the student body.
Well, it probably we were you're back in the old days, top half, bottom half, and all that kind of stuff. This was one of the big four cities, but since Hamilton and Tauranga and other places have grown, this place has kept and grown its infrastructure, and it's because of the students.
Yeah. Well,
so we get to have fantastic cafes, fantastic restaurants, a great central area to hang out in. It's real, and I live quite a quote unquote long way from the university. I have borders, and sometimes my students will say, "Oh, it's a bit far." 2.2 k's from the university.
That's a bit far.
And it's 4 k's from the Octagon, and that's where I live, and it's great.
Yeah, right.
It's great,
and there's a vibrancy too. More than all the infrastructure, the people. It gives a place a hum, right?
So part of the question as to why didn't I just go home was probably because here was home.
Yeah,
at that point.
Right,
it might have only been a couple of years in. But here was home. The kids were were bedded into schools. They had friends. This was home.
Are you amicable with your ex-wife?
Yes.
That's good. I'm happy for you. Not everyone gets that. It's
not people who we've written about the separation. It's on my blog and it's on her blog.
You've written it together?
We were both together when we wrote about it. It's hard talking about it. I don't want to tell her story and her stuff.
Yeah.
But when I say it was quite well publicised, I don't mean it
was in TMZ or anything.
I don't mean we were interviewed on the news about it.
Yeah.
But we both blogged about it.
Yeah.
About what happened. Because it wasn't actually that we didn't like each other or we fell apart or anything. It was more of a discovery. She discovered something about herself, and that was the reason for the dissolution of the marriage.
It sounds very much like a conscious uncoupling.
Yeah, I don't know who played the Gwyneth role in this one though.
But that's nice though. That's nice to at least be able to communicate that way, right?
Yeah, we stayed together for 10 months after the initial realisation came. And then we separated houses and actually live as neighbours now.
You live as neighbours?
Yeah.
That's cool for your kids, man.
Great for the kids.
Yeah.
I do have to say though, and this is part of not my boundaries to do with my former partner, but to do with just myself, is that perhaps what the desire at the start for how things would be at the end were a bit naive and like, we're not there. We're not what we voiced at the start, but I think compared to many, still amicable. So at the start I rejected the word amicable because I'm like, that's not good enough. But actually, amicable is fine.
Well, you're starting again. It's like something's ended. You're never going to have like the same relationship. The whole dynamic of it has shifted. So I guess you're starting again and you're rebuilding something new. The fact that you're not screaming at each other and being horrific and dragging each other through court and all that sort of shit.
Yeah, I didn't know
that's so good for your kids, man. Like, kids get deeply traumatized by a lot of that stuff, and that plays out in their own romantic relationships as they move through life. And I think, from what you've told me, that you and your wife should be commended on that.
Former wife.
Sorry. Well, I've just come from the Museum of Broken Relationships exhibition.
Oh, right. At the museum.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I talked down there tonight. I first discovered that it was a touring exhibition in LA a few years ago. But it started from some people in Scandinavia, I think like well over a decade ago. They were artists, and when their relationship came to its end, they turned the artifacts of their life together into this exhibition.
Wow.
And it was super powerful, and it's become like this global thing that's, traveled all around the world and landed here today. And it's interesting reading people's different griefs and separations, and some of them are kind, some of them are cruel. And I think it's something that we don't do particularly well, is know how to process loss and know how to lose someone we love who yet may still live next door to us. What I mean?
That was definitely a conscious choice though, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a bit simplistic, but I do sometimes think, you hear about these 20-year marriages that break up and the last 3 or 5 years has been shit. And I kind of go, I wonder how a couple can kind of go, we're done, but those first 15 years were pretty good. Maybe we can try and figure out how to carry that first 15 years on into the separation for the betterment of ourselves and for our kids. Because it's one of those things, I think, if you're bitter with an ex or you're hateful, all it does is impact you in the long run. It's that kind of...
Yeah. It's that whole being angry is like drinking poison and thinking the other person's going to die, right?
Yeah, what did I say? I was talking to someone just the other day. It was something like, is it hate is a mask you wear that just burns deeper and deeper?
I've That sounds vaguely poetic, but it kind of makes sense.
You know, so if you keep wearing it, which means it becomes your face.
Yes,
you know,
right.
It becomes who you are. So you may hate it, but then it eventually, it overtakes. It becomes your identity.
I think it's like any wound, right? Like you can heal well, or it can heal. It's like you break a bone, you got to let it sit properly. It's the same if you break a heart, and I think a lot of people don't let their emotional wounds sit particularly well. They just, I talk about this a lot. They escape from that feeling with alcohol and drugs and more sex and new partners and shopping and working and traveling and all this stuff to run away from that horrible emptiness inside them and that hurt and that rage and that confusion and how could they do that and why did it end up like this? You actually have to learn to think and stop and feel and, I guess, analyze why that relationship didn't work out and honor the good parts of it if there were some, because not all relationships have good parts, but most do. And that's going to help you like live with yourself and move forwards. And going back to that conversation about people having baggage, your baggage isn't going to be a weight. It's going to be a book of experience that you can pull from to make your next relationship healthier and happier than the one that you lost, right?
I was listening to a couple of comedians, Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, and their podcast the other day. They're Americans. It's a very funny podcast they do. And they were joking about, getting new wives and new families. Like they were just having a joke. But what the point they made, as Shakespeare talked about, speaking truth when you're joking around was how they'd be fucking amazing fathers if they did it again because of all the stuff they learned. Like all the stuff that they messed up on, they wouldn't do the next time around because it's sort of that relational thing as well.
Yeah, we say that. I've said this before. Like we say in the fight game, like you win or you learn. Like every time you lose a match or whatever, even if you get knocked out, there is genuinely some takeaway from that you can apply to your next fight. And I think while we don't want to talk about relationships in combative terms, like. The thing is there are transferable lessons from your experience that we have if we're open to looking for the learnings. Instead of feeling blamey and externalizing all the problems, we have to take ownership for our part in every relationship we're in, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's a conversation we need to have more of, is encouraging that self-reflection, not just when a relationship ends, but even during a relationship,
Totally.
Like if you don't want that relationship to end, why are you not taking stock of who you are and how you've grown in 1 year, 2 years, 10? Do you know what I mean?
I remember someone talking about, a lot of people who get married do kind of pre-marriage counselling, and they go through and they check, like especially if they're going to be involved with a minister or a religious sort of thing, and they go and do that. And I used to always think that's the easy part. The actual post-marriage counselling is the thing. I think it's because that honeymoon period of the first 6 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever. But then when the disagreements come, it's very hard to prepare for that in the pre-marriage counselling. And I'm not literally advocating for counselling again, but talking about there's growth and experience and learning who you are. Also, if you get married young, you're a different person. People who get married under sort of 25 before their frontal lobe has developed and that kind of stuff. You can be a different person at 27, and it's a learning experience.
That's a good point. Yeah, just in the talk I just gave, I was saying the same thing. I think I read a statistic somewhere that was like 55% of relationships that start before the age of 30 don't work out.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't cite where that figure, but a lot of them, and I think that's true because you are, physiologically and neurologically developing, but at the same time you're shifting who you are, and often not only as we shift, we don't know how to communicate those changes. We don't know how to transmit our shift in values and our interests and bring our partner. They don't have to be into the same stuff that we do. That's that's unhealthy. But we need to know how to communicate and have parallel lives. You know what I mean?
We also need to journey with them.
Yeah,
you can't be a person that goes off on a different journey and leaves them behind because then you just grow apart.
Exactly, and I think that happens a lot through your 20s. The 20s are like your years of self-discovery. Hopefully, you're out there doing some shit, making some mistakes, experimenting, figuring out what's important to you and what you want to do. Excuse me. This has been a learning for me. Never drink carbonated drinks doing podcasts.
This one here, I've never had this before. This is a sparkling water called Vista. No sponsors, by the way. I just bought
Yeah,
it.
I was going to say that was great. That was great product placement.
This is the bubbliest drink I've ever drank in my life.
I heard you burp before, man. That was furious. So I just threw myself off. But you know what I'm saying?
Like, I also think that, I remember, when you have, maybe you don't, but when you have kids and you've got a young baby,
I don't have my own children.
Yeah, okay. So
I have a stepson.
I'll drop some knowledge then.
I've side none.
So you have kids amongst your group of friends, and then your friends come along who are having kids after you, and they go like, you can give us some advice. And my one piece of advice always to parents who asked that question was, if you're going to read a book on parenting, don't just read one. Because one book will give you one perspective.
Yeah.
And it may not be the right perspective.
Yeah.
Another book will give you another perspective. And another book will give you another perspective. And I think if someone would say to me, if partners in their 20s or partners in their 30s, what's the piece of advice you'd give to them? One of the things I'd say is have your own life.
Yeah.
Because I've found, and this was not necessarily a boundaries thing, but like you totally get, you have all these friends in your 20s and stuff, and you go out with dozens. I remember my old man talking about having kind of lots of female friends I was probably 20, 19, still living at home, and the phone would be going off, a landline phone in those days, still going off the hook, and it would be this one and that girl, and just all friends. And I remember my dad once just quietly in the corner of the room going, God, I wish it was like this when I was a boy.
Yeah.
And then you connect with someone, and then inevitably what happens is some of these people drop away, and then you become, totally engrossed in this person, and then all of a sudden it's 10 years later and you realise, where have all my friends gone?
Yeah.
And what happened with me in my 40s when my marriage ended, and my friend came down from Auckland because he came down to support both of us actually, was he went, every guy I know in his 40s, if it ends up in a separation, has lost all their friends, because guys in their 30s and 40s, they hunker down and they focus on work and supplying and fathering and all these sorts of things, and all their mates who they used to play cards with or play pool with or whatever have all gone. And if I could say anything to someone in their 20s or 30s who are getting into lifelong relationships, I'd be, make sure you've got your own interests as well. Make sure you've got your own friends. Doesn't mean you can't cross over, but the circle around you, it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to have a healthy relationship as well.
I totally agree with you. And unfortunately, we don't have that. People think that, I see a lot of Hollywood films that I used to enjoy, and now I look back and I'm like, that's really stalky, creepy, unhealthy behavior that they're remodeling as healthy. Do you know what I mean?
Like what? Can you think of one off the top of your head?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot now. I don't know, like turning up to someone who you broke up with's house every day to like sing a song outside the window.
Holding up
holding up.
What was that movie? And holding up the ghetto blaster.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, sure, maybe once it's romantic, but quite often I think we portray unhealthy behaviors like a relationship is doing everything with your partner all the time, 24/7 as normal. But that's not. That's actually a recipe for failure and loneliness and dysfunction over time. You're dead right, man. Like, particularly men, we're not particularly good at maintaining social relationships.
Yeah.
And that's why we see so many men struggle with suicide or substance abuse, because when they really need like some human connection, some kindness or an external perspective, there's literally no one left.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we need to shift that. And you're right, it's not unhealthy to have separate interests to the person that you love and are doing life with. That's in fact the opposite. You don't need to, I'm in an awesome, I love my girlfriend Claire so much. And because we're both divorced, right? Mm-hmm. And we both kind of tried to figure out like, well, how to come that didn't work. And we get to have this really intentional relationship now. And where we both have quite diverse interests. Often we travel for work, or she's away from here, or I'm away here, and like that actually keeps our relationship like more passionate and more connected, because it's not like, what did you do today? Oh yeah, I know, because I was right there with you the whole.
That's true. Actually,
we're still always learning about one another.
So the way your lives are set up gives you an amount of separation from one another, which I think is healthy. I think that's one of the things I've learned as well, is actually that that separation whilst being with someone, it actually can be quite attractive as well.
It can be, because I don't know, familiarity breeds contempt, and you know, what is it? Distance is the something or other of desire. I don't know, but a degree of it. Obviously, going away for like months and months and months at a time and never talking to one another, that's going to erode a relationship. But a degree of physical distance, I think, is completely normal and even desirable. And same with divergent interests. You know, like you don't need to date or marry a carbon copy of yourself. But I think a lot of people are like, we've got nothing in common.
Yeah. Well, that's the old thing also. They do say opposites attract. Maybe there's a bit of truth in that as well.
It's cool to have, you need some shared values.
Yeah.
Like you need some shared values and some shared perspectives, I think, are helpful. It's pretty, you know, I mean, like I'm a vegetarian. I don't drink alcohol or use drugs, and I have like strong views on fucking everything, right? Like that's not always going to go down with like a carnivore who's into like shotgunning.
Is your partner a meat eater?
No, she is. She'll eat shellfish and stuff some of the time. But like, I've dated and been in love with people who've eaten meat. I don't really care. Yeah. I mean, I do care. Like from I guess a broader structural viewpoint, I'm down with people eating less meat, but it doesn't make me not love someone because do you know what I mean? Totally. Yeah. So she's by and large vegetarian, but she if she feels like it, will eat something that had a face. She'll be like, sorry, and I'm like, say sorry to them.
Is that your philosophy? It's more of a kind of a moral.
Yeah, I just look. Being a human being means that you're going to hurt other things. Yep. Every time you go to the bathroom, you're flushing waste into the sea, and you drive, and yada yada yada. I just try and live a little bit more lightly on the planet, and have done so through my diet for like 20 plus years. Nice. And being a vegetarian is one of the best things you can do. Like science tells us this now. Like before global warming was a global conversation, vegetarians and vegans would be like, yo, it's just good for the planet and it's good for the environment. And I don't think you're going to be healthier as a vegetarian or vegan, but chances are that you might eat healthier foods. You know, a lot of people shift to a more plant-based diet and they're suddenly like losing weight and their blood pressure's going down and like they're getting on top of like a bunch of different illnesses. Not because those foods are necessarily better, but because they're not eating the processed junk anymore. Yeah, right. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Because we've got a massive... I mean, I just had to have a vegan hot dog on the way here because it was the only place that we drove past. That's
from where? Epic Dog?
Epic Dog,
Epic Dog. So my kids have been there tonight as well.
Yeah, and so like...
They're pretty epic.
Yeah, it's epic, but that's not a healthy meal just because it's meat-free, right? But
we talk about when my kids go out, and we've done this ever since they were little, whether it's, you know, you're in a mall, so you grab something from the mall because you're there or whatever, we always at least try and say to them, let's just pick the healthiest option we can. Yeah. Sometimes the healthiest option is a pile of crap still, but you know, sushi is better than McDonald's or 100%. Whatever. Yeah. You know, I was going to check with Tommy because Tommy's a young fella. Listen to a couple of guys talking about ex-marriages and that kind of stuff in a lovely relationship right now. What do you think about what we've been talking about to do with relationships? I'm interested.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as you were talking about it because my partner moved down here to do a master's, and then I was working in Auckland for like half the year, and that was pretty tough. Just like long distance.
Oh yeah, that's hard.
First time in our lives. Yeah.
How did you navigate that? I find smartphones help. FaceTime.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, we call each other heaps, and I was making enough money to be able to fly down every month or so.
Nice. What's your partner doing their masters in?
Science communication, and just finished.
What does that mean? Yeah. Talking about science.
Yeah.
No, seriously, what is
transmitting the scientific? Like
taking, because obviously is that taking other people's research and disseminating it to the public? Yeah. Is that literally what it is?
That's what I think it would be, but I'm probably wrong.
This is where you go, I don't really know what my partner does.
Yeah. But in a video space.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, how do you... Because there's so much info coming out, and then you got to get someone to distill it and make it...
Understandable.
Consumable. Yeah.
Consumable, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Very cool. It's interesting as well, if you look up you on the internet...
Me?
You in particular, because although as you, I people either think that I'm incredibly lazy or professional that I don't come with a swath of notes about my guests in the studio. But the truth is, always have a bit of a look around and stuff. Your obviously your fighting background comes up in it. This is one of the things that I always thought was really interesting about you. You seem to be very socially aware, socially conscious, talking about things like global warming and things that are very much social justice orientated, it sounds like, for want of a less jargonistic term, but also this background in, a part of the world that would seem to maybe not necessarily be the polar opposite of that, but that maybe you'd find less people like that in that industry.
Sure.
And because you did... I think we've got some video up there of you as well. A little bit of kickboxing, King of the Ring, kickboxing sort of thing. Which looked to me to be you won this, but it looked to be the most unfair fight in the world because you were tied after 3 rounds and they made you fight a 4th round.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, this is a long time ago now. I fought Hayden twice. It was the first fight was a draw, which I still think I won. And then, we had this. It got pretty messy towards the end of it. Hayden's gone on to have be one of the top guys in the scene. He's kind of up and coming here.
So when was this?
This is 2013. It's a long time ago now. I haven't looked at this for some time.
When was your last fight?
This is it. This is my retirement fight. You're looking at now.
Oh really? Oh well, okay.
Yeah.
And you won this?
I did win that. Yeah. They drew it, and I was like, this sucks. I'm so tired. But then my friend Brad Riddell was cornering me. Brad's actually fighting in the UFC this weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, so me and Brad were old training partners, and I coached Brad for a while. But anyway, I come back to the corner, and Brad's like, yo, dog, positive mental attitude. Like PMA, I remember him saying it. He's like, go get it. And so we had this, that's Brad there in the shirt. So we had this, that's my boy Shannon, my boy Steve. I had a great corner, great knowledgeable dudes.
Yeah.
Chris Martin there.
From Coldplay.
Chris Martin, the boxing
just singing in the corner to keep your spirits up.
But they were like, yo, go get it. And so the last round of this is I just wasn't going to lose in front of, this is at ASB Stadium, and there's a couple of thousand people there.
Yeah.
Sky TV and stuff were there, and just managed to walk through the dude really just by being fitter. It wasn't particularly like stylistically beautiful or anything. He cut me with a kick in the head, and I guess people look at this and they're like, oh.
Well, it's a little bit,
but
it's a bit like
it's like anything though. Like how we look is not who we are. Yeah, I would be.
I agree with that sentiment. How we look is not who we are. However,
I am trying to knock another man unconscious.
No, but I think there are. If you look at the law of averages, that. I think the law of averages would say most people, how they look is quite similar to how they are. Don't judge a book by the cover, but mostly you can tell most books, the quality of them by looking at the cover.
Do you think so? I don't.
Well, I just think like if it's a cheap, shitty sort of single, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not just actually disagreeing with you, but I think sometimes these sort of big sentences we put out, we repeat these. They're not quite a trope, but it's almost a meme type thing. But if you break it down and take a step back and kind of go. I agree. I spent a lot of time in South Auckland growing up, a lot of time playing basketball, met some of the nicest, most gentle 6'9" Samoans in the world. You look at them, they look terrifying. But lovely, gentle, gracious, loving people. But I still think that if you lined up 80 people that looked one way, you could make a statement or a judgment that would be right. Often.
I think this way. I think that becomes I think that becomes racist. I think that becomes like classist. I think that becomes. I think that becomes like really judgmental. If you're like,
so you're telling me I'm racist and classist? And
No, I'm not
that's
saying
what I
that.
heard.
No, that's what you heard, but that's not what I'm saying. See, this is the good thing about talking in person rather than talking online, because you can clarify your point. Yeah.
Fuck you. That's not me.
But I think if we say, well, this person because of the color of their skin or because of their tattoos or whatever it may be that you're judging them on, and you say, well, of the law of averages, it's chances are they are that way that I perceive them, and I think that's what creates a lot of the problems that we have in the world. So,
do you think that's wrong though? Like when I say wrong, I don't mean morally wrong. I'm saying the law of averages.
Yeah.
If I look at that dude wearing the swan dry with the really short stubbies on, and you'll see them around Dunedin, sitting out there in the rain. I'm thinking about specific moments. I can go, southern man. Bit of a farmer, loves his hunting, probably has a ute. That I could well be right. Would that be wrong to be right with that analysis though?
I would say I wouldn't make that. I would do my best not to make that judgment.
Really? Because I hear what you're saying.
Well, I hear what you're saying too, in that there is
peace and love.
Yeah. I don't want to like yell at you.
No, let me say this, and you keep going. Because I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think when we talk about judging someone, we immediately go to don't judge me on the color of my skin, or don't judge me based on my height or anything. But I guess the example I gave was a stereotype, but it wasn't an offensive stereotype. Like if you get it wrong with a Southern man, so to speak, no one's going to go, "Oh, you filthy regionalist." Which
is the thing, though.
No, I
hate it when I read an article that's like Stephen Hamilton. I'm like, why are you stereotyping about that group of people
from Hamilton?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like we stereotype. Any sort of stereotype fucks me off these days.
Yeah.
I hate it when people like old white men. Or I'm like, well, I'm going to be an old white man. I hate it when we say like poor Polynesian people or stupid feminists or any sort of like throwaway generalization just does way more harm than good, whoever we're stereotyping.
I'm going to use the most offensive one you just said there as an example. What if you were talking about a group of Polynesians who were poor? Like, let's say it was you weren't saying because they're Polynesian, they're poor. You were saying this group of people in this area of the city are low socioeconomic families. So they don't have a lot of money.
And?
Well, no, I'm not even following that on. If you used it as a census type thing, maybe that would be a way that you could provide a solution for that reason as well. Where is the line between, I guess, classifying to help and stereotyping to be lazy?
Okay. Run me through that again.
So I think saying that, poor Polynesians, so in other words, you're making the analogy that they're poor because they're Polynesian, is obviously plainly racist.
Yeah, that's racist.
Completely, 100%. That's absolutely saying because of their ethnicity, they are this.
Yes.
What if you were talking about maybe through stats, maybe through facts and figures, maybe through
so you're
census?
Saying there's a greater percentage of people who are overrepresented who happen to be A, B, or C.
Totally, that these people are of Polynesian ethnicity. This group of people, I'm not saying all Polynesians, I'm saying this group of people, and they are lower socioeconomic status, so they are poor.
Yeah. And so I think that's the important thing is to not make a judgment on someone because of how they look.
Sure.
You can't look at someone and presume of their economic status or their educational outcome or their sexuality or whatever it may be based on how they appear. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make here.
Have you come up across, you're a tattooed man, you're a fighter, have you come up against that yourself? Like people make judgments against you?
Oh, definitely. Like, I think a lot of people, I've literally had people tell me to my face, they were like, yeah, man, I thought you'd be like this, but then I started talking to you and you were completely different.
Well, when I was doing...
I think a lot of people presume that because I like combat sports.
Yeah.
I like fighting. I don't fight anymore, but I'm a fight coach. I hang out with fighters all the time. I like the thrill of it. I like the art of it. I think martial arts is like a deeply, profoundly human experience. And yeah, sure, the sport looks brutal, but it's more the hype around it, the marketing of it, the capitalist overlay to sell these things, to make them consumable products, which I think does us all a disservice and misrepresents the true beauty of martial arts and combat sports. And that's where some of those stereotypes come from.
Totally.
And that's problematic. But I think it's the same with anything, like we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, even if the percentages, as you say, might be true. I think that's still really important that we all take a breath before we judge someone based on their external characteristics, whatever those characteristics might be.
So it's doing a disservice, obviously, to the person you're judging, even if you're correct, it's doing a disservice to them judging the book by the cover, because the other thing is if you're wrong, you may miss out on so much more that person actually is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's why it's really important that we are having conversations around implicit bias or unconscious bias and because quite often we all carry that to some degree when we need to do why do I think the way I think?
Yeah.
Why do I have these perceptions? Why do I have this belief about whatever it may be when it comes to groups of people or ideologies? And try our best to rigorously self-examine so we don't make those judgments and potentially miss out on really wonderful human relationships.
Well, I think that's the thing. If I judge you based on what I see and what I think, then it's actually me who misses out, not you, and that's part of it.
Well, I think
we both miss out.
I think it goes both ways. Yeah, I think if we all did more to dismantle our preconceived notions of groups and people within those groups, it's going to do a lot for social cohesion. But increasingly, we seem to be. Not increasingly, but there seems to be so much out there these days which is all about creating more division. And we're thinking about human connection, we're thinking about poor mental health, we're thinking about, society's increasingly like atomized when humans are profoundly social creatures. And we need to be together more for society to function and for us to function within society. And that's why I get frustrated with judgments and stereotypes and all those sorts of labels that get thrown around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, completely. I'm completely with you on that. What do you think the media's got to play in all of this?
Don't get me started. I mean, get me started. That's the idea.
Because I've actually just thought of one that we're going through right now, and it's based on the hysteria around coronavirus. You're seeing that there are, Asians, especially in New Zealand or around the world, who are basically being, spoken out against, who are being abused, hassled, kicked out of places because the person's terrified that this person, because they're Asian, are bringing coronavirus into their location.
I saw an article in the paper the other day about like a Filipino family that had been like stood down from school, and they're like, we're from the Philippines. Coronavirus, the issue is with China. Like that highlights the point I'm making, I guess. And I think media, and particularly social media, and I particularly think headline writers have got a lot to answer for.
Sure.
Because people will find the most inflammatory headline or pull out quote that they can. We live in a society where people don't even read the full story anymore.
No,
they're just like, I'll click on that, look at the first paragraph and the inflammatory headline and base a judgment. And there's an algorithm that will then in turn like feed more inflammatory things into my news feed. And then I'll start making those judgments about certain groups of people. And then we're getting this increasing polarization. And it's pushing us further apart. And that's how things like Trump getting voted in and Brexit happening. And, even in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I think we're pushing one another further and further apart politically and socially. And social media and media plays a role in that because it gets clicks. It makes money. It gets advertisers' views. And that's fucking really, really sad. We need to have... I don't know, I think headline writers, I think journalists, I think people who control those levers need to do a better job at slowing things down and not worrying about, I don't know, it should be about more than driving people to your website or your social media feed. It should, if we're thinking about political reporting, it should be about delivering as objective as possible information to people who are seen as citizens, not as consumers. I think quite often in a neoliberal capitalist society, news media is treating human beings as consumers, as a profit motive, and actually you need to treat them as citizens who have knowledge requirements to make informed decisions and choices about politics, because that affects them. And we don't do that, or we don't do that often enough, and that means that people vote against their own best interests.
Yeah, of course.
That means
look at Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It means that power elites get to continue to maintain their position. It means that things get worse, not better, essentially. And that's fucking sad. It makes me sad. Everyone talks about, we need to end suicide, or we need to end this, or we need to end that, but no one really does a whole lot to shift some of those broader macroeconomic, macro-political decision-making processes. And that's, I don't know, it's a constant source of anger and frustration for me.
I think the media thing as well, and actually, to be honest, that what we're doing now, this long-form conversation, is a little bit of a pushback to the media treating us like morons. And I don't know if I told you this time, but I've certainly told this story before, that the genesis of starting this up came when I was on TVNZ News website, and they had a video alongside a news story. So like, okay, because I'm dyslexic, I often watch the videos first.
Sure.
Because it's easier for me to take the stuff in. And the clip was 7 seconds. And I was like, are you serious? Do you really distrust me that much that you think all I can handle in this, fast moving age is a 7-second video? And that was actually the polar opposite of what I was looking for. I was looking for, I wasn't looking for a John Oliver, but I was looking for a long conversation, finding out about the information, and that was the part of it. But the thing about the customer or the reader or the media person who's taking in the media as being a dollar sign, a profit person for the thing. One of the reasons I'm quite looking forward to the RNZ TVNZ merger is I'm hoping, and I am fingers crossed hoping, because who knows, that we'll be able to get a media and a news especially output that doesn't rely on a commercial bottom figure.
I know. It's like
because it's those headlines. If it bleeds, it leads, and if it's clickbait, it gets it, and that's what's happening. And if we have a truly BBC-esque news source in New Zealand, because up until very recently, TVNZ did have to return a dividend.
Yeah.
And TVNZ7 didn't, and then they cancelled it. But if we truly get that, and if it's truly impartial and, factual and accurate, I think it'll be amazing.
It'll be amazing.
It'll be amazing.
I hate that, the charter got removed under national. Hey, not perfect, but still not a bad baseline concept, right? And that's, we've had this there's more information out there than ever before.
Yep.
But there's no real objective sources in, Yep. Everyone's got an agenda. And I don't know, and that makes it so hard for busy people in their day-to-day life to find reasonably objective news sources that they can make the decisions about that impact them and their families and their wider whānau and community. And that needs to change. And it seems hard though. There's so many weird conspiracy websites and I don't know, fucking fake news and do you know that people, you can see why people don't care. You can see why people get apathetic about politics when it's just a bunch of pundits and political elite and business elite
but the other thing
people
about
with vested interests screaming at one another.
But the other thing about that,
what do I believe?
It's the extremities on the edges.
We have get the most
that get the most voices. I remember writing writing a blog piece quite long ago talking about intelligent debate versus ideology. And if you're an ideologue, it's very hard, I think, to form a cohesive argument all the time, because anyone with any ounce of intelligence would say that sometimes you can't be 100% right all the time.
No.
So if you have an ideology that you adhere to strictly and always, then definition says sometimes you're going to be wrong. Unfortunately, it's the ideologues who are writing the blog posts that are getting the biggest things, who are the commentators on the television shows, who are all these sorts of things.
Yep.
And it's the 90% of us in the middle, from left to right, whatever it is, who aren't actually represented there and don't get asked to come on those shows and do those things because we
don't say crazy enough shit.
It's Don Brash keeps getting asked back to talk about.
Yeah, Don Brash hasn't been relevant for 20 years, if ever.
Well, on all sides, and I don't know. Like I said, I think that needs to change. How to make that change happen, I don't have an answer to. But do you know what's happening though? And this is not happening so much in New Zealand yet, but it's coming. Is the independent media, and you see it in America, and you see internet-based stuff especially being bigger than the cable news networks. Yeah. And I think that, not to harp on about what we're doing with any kind of, because who knows, but this is the model that offshore is using to try and get stories out there in their entirety. We've had several politicians come on. Marama Davidson was on last year, and she was long, grunty korero. That's how she described us, sort of thing. And that's what we do. We want to get past that first 20 minutes of bullet points and talking points, and then get into what the real conversation is. Because there's an appetite for that. Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people are I think a lot of people want to know. You know what I mean? I think the existing structure as it's been with the 7-second videos or whatever it is. Like, I think that's presumptuous that people. I think it's presumptuous to think that people don't have the attention span
what it is
to learn.
It's them saying it's a little bit what's happening in American politics in the moment. I know he's not following it that much, but Bernie Sanders is the front runner in this part of the voting, yet everyone who is in the kind of management area, the Democratic Party who are higher up, are all saying, well, he can't win, he's not viable, yet all the people who are voting are the ones saying we want him. It's not quite as black and white as that, because there's still lots of people there, but it's almost like those higher up don't trust the voters. But isn't that what a what a democracy is? It's actually like, you leaders of the DNC, you don't get to make this choice, we the voters do.
Yeah, and that's it's
treating them like children.
I agree with you, but what's the answer? I don't know.
The answer is some more of Warren, what's her name? Elizabeth Warren. This is from the debate that happened in just the last few hours. I thought we'd play this because we were talking a bit about your fighting, but this is a true blood sport. So Bloomberg is this billionaire who's come into the Democrat. He's really a Republican, but he hates Donald Trump so much. He's come into the Democratic race, and he wants to be the nominee to beat Donald Trump. He's a horrific pile of garbage that's done some horrific things. And if you want to see a true blood sport, in the debate this evening, this is the first thing that Warren said. And if people who are watching this don't know, Bloomberg is standing next to her on the stage. Play this, bro. Show you what a real blood sport looks like. Give us some volume.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies like redlining and stop and frisk. Look, I'll support whoever the Democratic nominee is, but understand this. Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another. This country has worked for the rich for a long time and left everyone else in the dirt. When the mayor says that he apologized, listen very closely to the apology. The language he used is about stop and frisk. It's about how it turned out. Now, this isn't about how it turned out. This is about what it was designed to do to begin with. It targeted communities of color. It targeted black and brown men from the beginning. And if you want to issue a real apology,
I love her.
Then the apology has
Elizabeth
to
Warren's
start
been really
with
lagging
the
in the
intent
polls.
of the plan as it was put together and the willful ignorance day by day by day of admitting what was happening, even as people protested in your own street, shutting out the sounds of people.
So Elizabeth Warren and Bernie are the two progressives on the far left, but Elizabeth Warren has become a little bit more corporate recently, so she's lost a lot of support. But I would bet dollars to donuts that you'll see some polls tomorrow. She'll get a pretty big bump.
Yeah. And what's her background?
She's a really interesting sausage. She was a Republican up until 1997. And then saw the light and came across to be a Democrat. And now she's been, for the last sort of 20 plus years, one of the more progressive voices in American politics. 2016, Bernie asked her to run against Hillary Clinton. And when she declined, Bernie ran against Hillary Clinton. And then, unfortunately, she then gave her endorsement to Hillary rather than Bernie, even though her politics lines up much more with his. And since then, she's been less effective. And I think what happened around Clinton getting the nominee in 2016 has burned a lot of those progressive voters.
Sure. So
I think the progressive vote in America doesn't trust her as much. So what you're seeing is 25% of the vote is currently going to Bernie, and Warren's getting maybe 15, whereas up until recently they might have both got about 20. But it means that she is starting to fall behind and not really getting enough delegates to move forward.
Right. Well, how do you think the election's going to play out?
I think that, I hate to say this, I think the DNC is going to screw Bernie Sanders and Trump's going to win again.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
Because what's going to happen is they had this incredibly undemocratic process in 2016 where they have superdelegates, and superdelegates basically get a single vote. A person gets a single vote the same as 10,000 voters. Yeah. Completely undemocratic. So when Bernie stepped aside in 2016, part of his stipulation was to get rid of the superdelegates in the first round of voting. But unfortunately, the superdelegates are in the second round of voting. So for them to get the nominee, they have to get, it's about 1,991 votes. Because there's still like 7 people in the race, no one will get 1991 votes in the first round of voting. Then the kind of the bottom 2 drop off, and then they vote again. But in the second round, the superdelegates get to come in. So if Bernie doesn't get 1991 or Elizabeth Warren doesn't get 1991 in the very first round, the superdelegate votes count in the second round. And I think what's going to happen is Bernie will be the front runner at the DNC conference. And in the second round, the superdelegates will get someone behind someone like Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden, or maybe even Bloomberg, and that'll be the nominee. And then Trump will wipe the floor with them. Yeah, I think if Bernie's the nominee, Bernie wins. I think anybody else, Trump wins. That's my opinion.
My limited take on it, I would concur.
Yeah. I think Bernie's amazing. I was in 2016. I was talking about Feel the Burn. He's just it's really cool.
Yeah. He's like he's him. Yeah. He's not anyone else's.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing I'm constantly doing. Every time I get a politician in, I always ask the same question because I like to. We make clips out of the show and we send them off to places and stuff.
Oh, yeah, word.
And I always say, and I had right-wing politics. I had David Seymour sitting here, and I'm like, can you explain to our American brethren how we can have free healthcare? Just explain that. And then I always clip that and put it off somewhere and send it off to some friends in America and let them pass it around. And the thing that always blows my American contacts' heads is our quote-unquote right-wing Prime Minister and John Key supported things like a free healthcare, supported interest-free student loans, supported working for families. And so in America, our Labour Party is their progressive, so is their Bernie Sanders, and it's almost like our National Party is their centrist to centre left, because they're so much further to the right.
I know. I'd be terrified if we lost our healthcare as a sports person. As a retired sports person who continues to live an athletic lifestyle. Like even, National did put a surcharge on for ACC. They used to be free for people. Yep. And again, $20 if you are financially struggling can be enough to stop you from going to a physiotherapist and getting an injury treated too. And I think any sort of rollback of our publicly funded healthcare is a real cause for concern. So, it does hearten me that we are not that far to the right. But I live in fear that there will be like a user pays.
Truth. New studios falling apart.
That was hilarious.
Nothing fell off. We're still on air.
That we all continue to roll. Like a more user pays model, I think is super detrimental to everyone.
I think that if you look at the Western world, I actually believe that all the countries are left wing. Even if you look at America, back to 1994. So I think that's when Clinton came in. There's been, 94, 98, 02, 06, 10, 14, 8. So there's been, I've got the wrong dates, but there's been about 8 elections or 9 elections since then. Only on one of those elections has the right side of politics got the popular vote, had more votes on the right to the left. Every other election, the left has got more votes than the right. I think that's enough of an argument to say it's a left-wing country. I think if everybody voted in New Zealand, because primarily the people who don't vote, not primarily, but a lot of people who don't vote are in the lower socioeconomic group, are more primarily potentially Labour supporters and National supporters. I think if everyone voted in New Zealand, it would be Labour landslide every single time. But I actually think that's every country. The right are very good organisers, and they're very good at getting their message out and their people out. The left have a lot of people who sit at home. And I'm not saying that in the judgment way. I'm just saying I think that's what it is.
No, but statistics bear that out.
Yeah, and so I actually think that if every person in every Western country voted, I think every country would be a left-wing government.
Yeah, but the problem is I think that they don't. And there are structural barriers to why lower socioeconomic communities don't vote, like transportation, for example, totally. Or like the weather, or like childcare. Those are things that keep some people at home.
Well, I wonder if, this comes along and in the next, couple of election cycles, you put your vote in on your smartphone and or your computer. And I know that still hassles some people,
No, but
compared to...
Yeah, I agree with that. Even with our local body elections,
Yep.
we've got like terrible turnout in Auckland for our local body elections. I have no idea what it's done here. But digital voting, I think, would be a great way to encourage more people to partake in democracy. But apparently there is research and data on this, is that there's a whole range of issues that why it's not particularly... perhaps a silver bullet that I might be saying. But for me, getting people involved in making decisions about who represents them is super important, and we need to remove, I don't know, barriers to access.
I think the only genuine reason we don't go fully digital would be security concerns. But then I go, we've all got bank accounts. They're all online with our money in them. Yeah. We've got IRD accounts. There's all these things that have to be massively secure. Our PayPal accounts, our whatever.
Surely possible.
So if you can keep those secure
once every 3 years.
Yeah, surely you can figure that out. It was funny actually talking about Bernie. I was watching. It's like I sleep with American politics going in my ear. You know, I get it up. I'm not a Bernie bro. I get up and I check out what's happened overnight, see if Trump's blowing up the world. It's just what I do. And I was watching a speech the other day. It popped up on my Facebook feed and it was Bernie. So I had a look at it while I was typing away, you know. And it was hilarious. It might have been in Nevada actually, which is where the next primary is, which is that debate is. And at the end of the debate, he was like, and we have early voting in Nevada, so we're all going to go down the polls now. And like the Pied Piper, he walks out of the thing and he takes this whole group with him to go into early voting, which of course would have all been voting for him because it was his thing.
That's it.
It was hilarious. It was so much fun.
I used to follow the American elections with perhaps not the passion that you do, but a lot more closely. But I guess I've become... disillusioned.
Yeah.
I've become I did a degree in politics and I've had...
Why did you do that? What was that?
I just wanted to understand the world that I lived in better. Right. I'd actually been through Mexico and I went to Chiapas. I think it was 2004. And it was one of the most impoverished, marginalized places where the indigenous people continue to like live a subsistence existence and have don't have the same rights as other Mexicans. And there'd been a attempt at armed overthrow. I think what's the date? January 1st. When did NAFTA go into it? Can you look up when NAFTA came into effect? I think it's 2001 or 2000.
North American Free Trade Agreement.
Yeah.
NAFTA.
Anyway, on the launch of 1994. Sorry. Okay, so January 1st, 1994. Can you type in the Zapatistas or EZLN? Whenever NAFTA came into... type in EZLN. EZLN. Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional. That's when did it start? When did they launch the revolution? 24 years on.
So 24 years
this article is 2 years old.
They took up
so
arms in
1994. Yeah, so 1st of January 1994, the EZLN launched this revolutionary attack in Chiapas, Mexico, right? And they were tired of being downtrodden, disenfranchised, and murdered, and excluded from the economic system.
Mm-hmm.
And NAFTA really did, campesinos, like the people who depended on agricultural marketplaces, it did them a massive disservice because you could flood the Mexican market with American subsidized things like corn, for example.
Sure, yeah.
And pushed, so many Mexicans out of, indigenous Mexicans.
Local growers and stuff.
Yeah, out of, agriculture into, say, drug cartels. Yeah. Because they could make money there to feed their families and survive, right? Anyway, it's a very interesting place for me as a young person with no, deep political knowledge, but who had a head full of hip-hop and punk rock songs and hardcore bands singing about injustice to me, including Rage Against the Machine, who wrote the song People of the Sun, which is all about this.
All right.
Yeah. And so it resonated. I distinctly remember now, it was 2004, a little kid coming up to mine and my girlfriend's plate and licking it because they were so hungry.
Wow.
And so when I decided to go back to university in 2006, I just wanted to understand that. So I did a double major in Spanish and politics, and went on to do my honors in Spanish. I wrote my dissertation around gang culture in El Salvador and how that came to be. And really I did a broad study in social sciences, I guess. And it gave me a skill set to look at the structural reasons why human beings make the decisions that they do. Because we live in an individualist culture, and we always blame individuals for bad decisions to make. We do that in the news media. Like Simon Bridges does it every fucking day, you know, like these people are lazy, or these people join gangs because they're a piece of shit or whatever. And we divorce people from all the historical constraints and drivers and colonialism, and that's the same everywhere in the world, you know. And I wanted to understand that. I wanted to understand why some people are so disadvantaged and other people have so much going for them in real sense. Why do some people, like, we have a social gradient of health in New Zealand. Like, if you're Māori and a male, you die that much earlier than if you're Pākehā. And it's the same in all colonized countries. You know, if you're an indigenous person anywhere in the world, like, chances are that you've been pushed down the social scale through no fault of your own. That's nothing to do with your ethnicity or skin color or the language you speak. It's to do with history and access to power. And I wanted to understand that. And so I went into university very idealistic and very angry, and I still have those things. But
you still have the anger?
Yeah, I do.
Because there's also other emotions coming out as well.
Yeah, it makes me sad. Like, it makes me really, really sad that so many people, like billions of people, go to bed hungry every night. I don't know about billions. I don't know the numbers anymore. But, you know, hundreds of millions. You know, in the United States, in New Zealand, kids go to bed hungry. You know, like, we have so much opportunity, the three of us sitting here. You know, there are kids who fucking, you know, they're failing at school and they're dropping out at school and they're going to jail and they're getting in crime, and it's because they're fucking hungry. You know, like, they may have dyslexia, or no one ever read them a fucking book at night, and their parents beating the shit out of them, and it's not their fault that they go on to be violent and be abusive to their partners and join gangs and do crime and murder one another. Like, yeah, sure, we do get a degree of a decision-making process in our life, but though we don't all get the same opportunities to make the same decisions. And it's fucking frustrating that people seem so oblivious or obtuse to that very simple fact. You know, like, that's why, despite my disenfranchisement and disillusionment with politics, that I still care about it and want people to be involved in it, because I want all those people to have a easier go of life. You know, like, all people should have opportunities to be the best that they can be, and that doesn't come down to individual choice. It comes down to systems that either work against you or work for you. And quite often those systems are still set up in a really colonialist, classist, racist way. And those words, I think, get thrown around too much these days, and everyone's a fucking Nazi, and that does us no favors either in furthering these conversations, because it takes the genuine meaning away from those words. But we need to understand that those are real things, and that whether we're here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or we're talking about the rights of Aboriginal peoples and First Nations peoples in Canada, or in Aboriginal people in Australia, like, we need to take ownership of that history, and policy needs to reflect that. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm kind of got off topic. I get all emotional and overwhelmed, but I went here and I saw the little kids like you see in this photo, and I wanted to know why their life was so different to my life. And that's what I've continued to, I guess, study.
It's such an open-ended question, eh? It's like, it sounds like...
Yeah. Why did you go to university? It wasn't to get a job.
No, that's what I'm saying. You went to learn.
I went to learn.
Which is what university is for.
Yeah, but not anymore. Like, even in, you know, like you say that we still have all these right-wing ideas about getting an education, about getting a good job. And that's why you see the devaluement of like arts degrees.
Totally.
You know, you see like
humanities
are like increasing underfunded. You know, like we promote like business degrees and mathematics and science and all these things, which are important, don't get me wrong. But we increasingly say, if you're going to get a good job and make good money, then that's the reason you should get an education. But that's not why you should get an education. You should get an education to be a better person.
Yeah.
And then you can commoditize your skill set and your knowledge. I've done that. Like, my education has allowed me to command a greater salary, but that's not why I went to get an education. I wanted to understand the world, and by understanding the world, I could better understand myself in that world. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, I get so emotional. I'm fucking emotional dude. But because despite like my unearned privileges, my life hasn't been easy. You know, like I come from a long family history of poor mental health and alcoholism, and all that's impacted me. And I had a really fucked up childhood because of that, right? But that's not because my fucking dad's a bad person, or my great grandfather, whose name I don't even know, had, you know, he had PTSD from World War I, and you know, like blah 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 blah. Like, all these things impact us individually, and I wanted to understand that on a population-based level, and that's what my academic education has given me, and that's why, while I try and stay away from politics because I think it's ugly in a National Labour, Green Party, ACT Party sense a lot of the time, that's why I love working with groups. That's why I love speaking in schools or businesses or here at the university or going on social media or going on podcasts like yourself and talking about some of these ideas, because I want people to, I guess, reflect on where they are in life because of what's happened to them or because of the situation they found themselves in, and like, I guess, make more conscious decisions based on that self-reflection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It seems to me that it's probably going to be poorly paraphrased, not paraphrased, but the thoughts I am is like, I've always heard that the best thing about university is you go to learn more about yourself. You go to grow up, you go to get challenged, you go to get to learn how to learn on some levels. And I've got friends who have done double degrees and stuff, and they're the double degrees have got nothing towards their work they're doing now, but because of doing those degrees, it changed them as a person, and it gave them a skill set to now use in their employment sort of thing. And it sounds like you're the example of someone who doesn't going, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, which are great professions, but going as I want to be a human, and this is where I'm going to find out more about that.
That's pretty much it, man. Like, I studied like Spanish literature and shit, dude. Like, like stuff that I've never used, but it was fascinating. You know, like I got a scholarship. I went to university in Chile for a while. I got to understand how other people live in, I guess, a more tangible sense through experiences like that. I just really, I'm still on that journey. Like, I still want to understand myself in relation to the world and why the world made me the way I am, right? And why it continues to, I don't know, push people one way or the other. And I think that's, you know, you like, what role does the media play in all this? I think it's important that the media doesn't dumb things down and make inflammatory headlines and outrage culture and clickbait and all this shit. And it does, you know, like Newsroom is a website that I really like. You know, they do really good long form articles.
Spin-off, I like Spin-off as well.
Yeah, me too. Like, a lot of the time, like sometimes I find the Spin-off a bit, it's probably my favorite news source, right. but at the same time, sometimes I feel like there is like a tone to it, which I'm like,
there's definitely a tone to it,
which I think is, it's that old like Steve from Hamilton type. You know, I think that's not helpful.
And they've also firmly placed themselves in a part of the political spectrum,
which is cool. I get that.
It's fine.
You know, like,
it's why there's Christian radio stations. It's okay to have that.
Yeah, I just think when we, whether you're left wing or you're right wing, when we other people and we make them so much different to us because of things they might not even know that they know, or they're partaking in power structures that they might not even be aware that they're doing. They might be unaware of all these number of things. And when we other them and we degrade them and we deride them, we put them down, it does nothing to make things better. And there's a tone to some writing in the Spin-off that makes me go, come on, man. Like, yeah, I know that people who already agree with you will laugh at that, and there's a community cohesion that comes from the othering of people.
Yep.
But if you genuinely want things to change for the better, othering them and making fun of them and deriding them and making people the butt of your jokes isn't going to bring them into the conversation. It's not going to shift who they vote for. It's not going to shift like their ideas about sexism and equality or racism and inequality or any of those things. It's just going to be like, fucking loony liberals or blah, blah, blah. When actually, like, I want the same things as those authors. I just think that we need to temper our outrage sometimes. And maybe that's a privileged thing to say. Maybe I get the opportunity to temper my outrage. But I think if we need to be pragmatic in how we approach social change.
It's talking about kind of getting people on side. Maybe you're not using that thing, but it's reminding me. I just said this to my eldest tonight because they've been left in charge, and when kids are left in charge, they can all of a sudden have a bit of a big chest, and I'm the boss, and I'm this, and I just said, remember you can catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
Bro, 100%. 100%. I love that saying. It's true, man.
Yeah.
Like, I've worked in, broadly speaking, I've worked in professional careers which have been about stopping family violence. I do work for White Ribbon. I work for the Ministry of Social Development. Like, I literally do a bunch of work for the government department. I've worked for the Ministry of Health around alcohol and drug harm prevention, and I continue to do advocacy around all those sorts of things and mental health. As I started doing radio with Mike King in the Nutters Club.
Nice. Yeah. Sunday nights. Is he still doing that?
No, Mike's not doing it. A good guy called Kyle McDonald and Hamish Coleman Ross do that now. Okay. But yeah, so broadly speaking, all those things are about human behavior change. There is nowhere in any of those professional spaces that making fun of other people and putting them down and making them feel like shit and shaming them shifts their behavior or their ideas. If you make someone who's got a problem feel bad about that problem, they're not going to want to change. They're going to tell you to go fuck yourself. Yeah. And yet so many people on the internet seem obsessed with making other people who've got different ideas, values, and have done shitty things fucking eat shit all the time.
Yeah.
It's like how can I score the most points? And that's not going to make things better. Sure, It might make you look really good to your crew. You might get more followers, or you might be, but you know what? Like, offline, you're probably not perfect either, man, because you're a fucking human being. And I get frustrated with that. And yeah, I get frustrated with that because I want the same things as those people. I don't want there to be sexual violence. I don't want there to be racism. I don't want there to be class inequality. I don't want so many people to kill themselves. I want all those things. But could you just be a little bit more fucking pragmatic about how you go about things?
Okay, well, hey, speaking of...
Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, look, but speaking of
You're
pragmatic...
You're younger than us. What do you think?
He's 14.
Yeah.
No, you
Does that make sense?
speak the truth. You speak the truth.
Why don't I speak the truth? It's a whole bunch of opinion, but like that's what I feel, and I want your take on it as a younger person.
Oh, it does feel quite overwhelming. There's so many
facets to it.
Yeah. Just dealing with like little bits of racism throughout your day, kind of thing.
And there's nothing wrong with saying
with
saying that's fuck racism or fuck racist. I get that, but. Or like fuck sexist or fuck sexism. And that's why I said, like, I'm privileged. Like, I don't have to deal with racism personally. But I have loved and love people who have and continue to and always will. Same with, a whole bunch of things. So I guess I understand the outrage, but like I said, maybe we need to temper our outrage some of the time, at least, to be constructive rather than just outraged. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
I've got a challenge.
Oh, I love a challenge.
Pragmatic challenge. And I was going to say you've guilted me into this. It's not that at all.
Well, because I used to be like that just before I got away. When I was in my 20s, before social media was such a big thing, and I was at university and learning all this shit, my world was shifting, I'd tell off my friends and the people around me for like, I don't know, whatever it was that I thought they were doing wrong. But I've come to learn that just makes you look like a fucking asshole. And they're just like, fuck off, and you've got no friends anymore. And so, like, on a broader level, if we want people to acknowledge their ideas or behaviors that might be shitty, yelling them is not necessarily the best way to go about that, I would argue.
All right, here we go. I've got a challenge. All right. And you've prompted me because I've been meaning to do this for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and I haven't done it. So this is nothing that I'm trying to be proud about or anything. There's an app. You can look it up if you want. Okay, can you zoom in on that? The bottom blue one. Does that come up there? Is that screen on there all right? It's called Share the Meal.
I can see that. What is that?
Yep.
All right?
Oh, yes.
You see it?
I think I have this, but I haven't used it yet.
Okay, so Share the Meal. I've been seeing this advert coming up on YouTube quite a lot, and I've been meaning to do it. And your emotional plea there on some level has caused me to go, fuck, I'm just being lazy. I need to do this. The advert says something. Why don't you look it up? Look up Share the Meal app, charity. In New Zealand dollars, 50 cents a day can feed a kid for a day. 50 cents.
Amazing.
And what I decided to do...
I didn't know about this.
Okay, so what I decided to do was every time and you can do it with one touch of a button, you can donate 50 cents and you feed a kid. And so what I've decided to do is every time, like I have business meetings, I get a coffee or I get whatever and spend something like that, I'm going to go to this app and tap the button.
I love that. That's
because,
so cool.
Like your coffee costs you $4.50, so it's $5.
Who cares?
Yeah, not a big deal. Your slice costs you $3.50, so it's $4. And I think that this is something I've been meaning to do. And actually, maybe we should just start mentioning this more on the podcast. Nothing to do with these guys, unassociated with these guys at all. But it's been something I've been thinking about. If I can afford a whatever it is, a $3.99 can of burp juice. If I can afford a $4 can of burp juice, then I can afford a $4.50 can of burp juice.
Yeah, I agree.
By tapping the Share the Meal and donate and feeding a kid for a day.
Simple things like that. Yeah.
So let's
until
let's
the structural things that we've been, I guess I've been kind of vaguely talking about, change.
Yeah.
We do need to collectively come together to partake in initiatives like this.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Do you think university today, seat of learning as the young ones would call it, is the same sort of place for sharing open communication, learning, freedom that it wasn't when I was there, or is there a sea change coming?
I don't know. I'll find out though, because I just got accepted to do my master's degree.
Oh, right. What are you doing it in?
Sociology.
Oh, cool.
I'm looking at the transmission of what we call hegemonic masculine norms or hegemonic ideas around masculinity through hip-hop music, because that really underpins, not hip-hop music specifically, but like how do we learn to be men, and those constructs of masculinity really underpins a lot of the work I do now, like professional work, not just like advocacy. So yeah, I decided to ante up and do that. I'm a bit nervous about it, but it's been 10 years since I graduated. I think I graduated in 2010.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I see obviously the headlines about people getting shouted down and deplatformed and all that sort of stuff in America. Yeah. I don't know about New Zealand campuses, so I'm not really in a position to comment. I hope not. Yeah. But I think there, like I said, like as I'm saying, like don't let your outrage outweigh your pragmatism. It's great to be outraged. There's fucking a million things to be outraged about. I think we just need to make sure that we spread light with all that heat, not just more fucking fire that destroys things. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I like the idea of moving towards the heat, because that can be a source of, it can be life-sustaining warmth. Yeah. But also can set you on fire and kill you.
You do, 100%, man.
So there's that balancing act, isn't it? Of heading towards that heat.
It is. Like in a very real way. Like, yeah, I was a real angry kid. I spent like 20 years doing combat sports, like fighting people here and there, right? And I wasn't fighting, I was training to fight. And I did it for a long, long time. I don't really talk about it as much, but like the music I've been, Richie Hardcore, like hardcore is a music scene that I grew up in. It's like really pissed off, angry music that grew out of the punk scene, music full of anger and outrage and ideals, and that's really driven me forward. I think anger, when channeled well, can drive us forward and can make ourselves better, and in a small way we can help make other people better and things better. But we've got to, like you said, like not let it consume us and destroy us.
Yeah, but
and the
especially
things around us.
Within music, especially anger. I mean, like I'm older than you, obviously. Grew up in the 80s. I had my teenage years, and I still have on my Instagram feed my original Straight Outta Compton NWA album that I bought in Sounds Queen Street in 1988 as an American import.
Right.
And I don't judge this book by the cover, but that's what I grew up on. All the way through there, Ice-T, Ice Cube.
Me too, man.
That was my upbringing, and it's amazing looking back on that now, being so far removed from South Central Los Angeles, seeing what they were actually talking about and why. And in fact, I sat with my kids too, maybe just the eldest the other day, and we went through Fuck the Police. I was like, do you know why? And no, and this is why, and this was what was happening, and it's actually a social commentary. Yes, it's got swear words in it, but it's a social commentary. And if you watch the movie Straight Outta Compton, and I know there's a lot of, like, for example, violence against women that's left out of that movie.
I know it was left out of the movie.
But there is a part of that movie where they're fighting for their First Amendment right, and they're basically saying, when we walk out our front door, this is actually what we see. This is our reality. Yeah. They were commenting on what they see through there as well. So,
have you been to Compton?
No.
I was in LA, and this was maybe last year, and the rapper The Game.
Yep.
His father runs these hood tours.
Oh,
and
really?
Out of like morbid curiosity, I was like, I'll do that. You pay like $100 something. You get driven through all those neighborhoods. And of like, there's Kendrick Lamar's house. This is where Dr. Dre went to school. So it was very interesting. And then I felt like kind of a terrible voyeur, but at the same time, like, it was not at all what I thought it would be.
How so? What did you think it would be, and what was it?
Well, I grew up on all that music that you listen to too, and all the same Hollywood tropes, and it makes it sound like it's like a running war zone, like all the time, right? Like in the middle of the day. In 2019 or 18 or whenever I went, it definitely wasn't like that.
Bowling for Columbine, the movie Bowling for Columbine, does that exact thing. They stand on the corner that Rodney King got his head kicked in on him, because South Central Los Angeles is seen as this war zone, and it was a beautiful green leafy road, and that was the point that Michael Moore was making in that documentary, was the media portrays this as a certain way, but that's not reality. And I remember the stats for that, and it was a long time ago, this documentary, but the murder rate was dropping in America, but the coverage of murder rate had gone up by 600%.
I've seen similar statistics around a bunch of stuff.
And so everyone thought the place was more dangerous than it used to be, where actually the truth was the opposite.
Yeah.
Purely based on reporting.
That's actually quite true with a lot of like indicators. A good friend of mine was like, because I do like hear all the problems in the world, like on social media or whatever, like too many of us do. And he was like, here, read this. And it was an article, I think from Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times, maybe. And it was like, the fact of the matter is, most things are getting better. I'll have to find that article. I wish I could tell you what it was called so you could pull it up. Well, but it was a really fascinating look, and I was like, oh, I never considered that.
Well, one of the ones that seems to be still fairly current is, for example, violent assaults, especially on women, apparently are going down, but the reporting of them is going up because women feel more emboldened and stronger to report them.
Yeah.
I agree, but it looks like perhaps they're getting worse, but actually because they would say 90% weren't reported, 80%, they're estimating it's trending down, even though the reporting could be trending up.
Well, as far as I understood it, family violence figures are worsening in New Zealand.
Right.
Which may come down to reporting.
I mean, you're the expert, not me on this. You've worked in those fields. I read the headlines.
Okay, yeah,
just the headlines, nothing else.
Guilty.
I was thinking when you were talking about reading the headlines, actually some newspapers have gone even worse, and I think the Guardian's one of them. Not only do they have a headline, then they have 4 bullet points. So if you can get past the headline, you can read the bullet points of the article, and then it has the article.
Well, it's like Vice magazine do that too. Like I read an article yesterday. It was like, I don't know, it's just unnecessary inflammatory. Like the headline is like, this will get people upset. Then you read the article and you're like, oh, that's a reasonable argument.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I feel myself fading for food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that'll be a great time to thank you and say goodnight.
Hey, this has been fun. Like, I felt this warm up over the course of the evening.
Well, do you know what? It's great that it's warmed up because you're back in June.
Yeah, I am back in June.
And I think that we should
I'm like, what am I doing in June?
catch up again.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you have
Thanks,
repeat
Richie.
guests?
We have said, because we just like to talk and have conversations, and like I said to you before the podcast, it's like we've met in a pub on a Friday night at 11 p.m. It just means we can meet next Friday
It's
as
like,
well.
do you want to have another date? It's like a second
Another date, yeah.
All right,
Second
cool.
date.
Hey, thank you. It's been nice to meet you. It's
been fantastic.
Publicly.
Yeah. And we'll hopefully see you again in June.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love that. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.